I was born and raised in Detroit. I love my city. I adore all the growth and the architecture and all the amazing things we've accomplished, whether it be Motown or the automotive industry. And as I've traveled the world and spent time and lived in different places, I find that there's no place like home. Detroit will always be home to me, and it'll always be a place that I love. I love this staple, which is amazing. And it really inspired me to do my podcast called Detroit Girl Transformed. I decided to do this podcast on Resilient Radio, which is a Black-owned station based in Detroit. And it really highlights the transformation of my city while I, as an individual, was transforming. And what kind of people come out of Detroit, which are really people with hustle and grit, who are determined and also exhibit perseverance. The podcast will really focus on different people that have different phases of transformation, whether it be their finances, their well-being, their travel experiences, how they transform their relationships, how they transform their spiritual beliefs. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, and that's what's best for our city, and that's what's best for our legacy and our future and our family. Welcome to episode 3 of Detroit Girl Transformed. I am your host and favorite Detroit girlie, Toni Carter. Last week, we had an hour of girl power with 2 physicians and a healthcare executive talking about Black women's health. This week, I'm so excited because we're going to be talking about the food and the palate. And we're talking about what it means to have a healthier lifestyle when it comes to food. So I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, Elle Simone Scott. Elle is a food styling guru trailblazer who manages to make food both stunning and approachable. Elle has made some incredible milestones in the culinary industry, which we're all proud of. She was recently a judge on America's Test Kitchen, The Next Generation. She has also been on-screen test cook for that show as well, which is also really fun and exciting. We'll talk about a couple of clips as she's leading up to her episode, so you guys will see a nice preview. In 2022, Elle provided stylish food styling and expert advice for boards, stylish spreads for casual gatherings, a best-selling, highly regarded book that is also going to be found on Amazon.com. In addition to that, she has a new release called Food Gifts that I'm really excited about. Elle has made her mark in the food industry with several guest appearances on various shows to include Good Morning America, The Food Network, The Katie Couric Show, and The Tom Joyner Morning Show. She also was featured in Forbes and the Boston Globe. So I can go on and on about this amazing guest today. She also prides herself in using her organization, SheChef, to advocate for women of color and inspire them in the food space. So let's give a warm welcome to Chef Elle Simone. I'm such a fangirl. Welcome to Detroit Girl Transform. Woohoo!
Woo, I'm so happy to be in the room.
Thank you so much for joining. And thank you so much for inspiring women of color in this industry. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think it's just such an amazing background that you have. And you definitely stay so grounded and connected to all of your audience, your followers, but more importantly, the people that have known you from way back in the day. So I just really appreciate your relatability. So I love it. I love and thought it was pretty cool when you said the food was approachable and stylish, because I consider you to be very similar. So I think you really represent your culinary expertise. So now that I'm done fangirling out, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about yourself and who you are and what brings you joy. And we just want to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, well, I'm a Detroit girl, obviously. That's why I'm here, right?
What up, though?
What up, though? Born and raised. And I currently live in Boston, Massachusetts, which is the home of America's Test Kitchen. Prior to moving here, I lived in New York for about a decade, which is where my culinary career began. Some of the things that bring me joy are cooking still, fortunately. I love like cultivating community and conversations around food and community. You know, like food is such a bridge for so many different types of conversation, right? It's political, it's personal, it's cultural. So I really enjoy building those conversations. I recently started building miniature scenarios, like these little mini libraries and greenhouses. I've been trying to get into a lot of, little knick-knacky things. I'm leaning into my my homebodiness.
I love that. And I think when you spend time doing the things that bring you joy on a consistent basis, I just think it's a part of your well-being routine,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
true. It's true, but when you do a lot of work that is for the community or for other people, I have learned over time that it is really important to carve out time for yourself. I was not always good at that, but that's something that I am working to master right now, making time for myself, my little joys, relaxation, mental health, it's really important.
yeah, I know I have these things. I'm trying to get a dance break in. I talked about that on the last episode. So I'm really hoping that today me and my friend was supposed to learn that dance. Where them fans at?
Oh, fra,
Yeah.
fra, fra.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I need to really just commit to those things because I was like, I could learn that dance this week. Like I need to
Mhm.
just make that, that time block to do that. So
Yes.
you have such an amazing background that highlights, culinary ambition, innovation,
Mhm.
and you just have a great story of resilience. What inspired you to go into the culinary industry?
Oddly enough, it was kind of a necessity sort of situation. It wasn't, I went to Eastern Michigan University, go Eagles. And I left Eastern Michigan with the intention of being a social worker. And I did follow that path for some time. But at around, I think maybe it was around 2008, there was a recession, right?
Mhm.
And I was working for a nonprofit agency that lost their funding, and I was quickly spun into unemployment and had to make some, just had to make some snap decisions about what I would do next, right? And so, my very first job ever at 16 years old, I worked at Olga's Kitchen at Fairlane Mall, right? I was a server. And I did that until I graduated from high school. So I had always kind of had my toes in the hospitality culinary world. And I kept it there. Like even when I was a social worker during the day, I'd always be like a hostess at a restaurant at night. It was a way to feed yourself for free, a little way to survive while you pay your student loans back. Uh, but when I found myself unemployed, I was working at the Olive Garden as a hostess and just kind of like begged my way into more work, and I became like a prep cook. So like I just chopped all the vegetables. And I learned all of that from two Guatemalan sisters. We had a huge language barrier between us, but they taught me almost everything that I know or knew before going to culinary school. So I needed work, and the life story part of that is that I always enjoyed cooking. I come from a family of really, really good cooks, and I've been known to say that I'm not the best cook in my family. I'm just the only one who does it professionally.
Oh
Like,
wow, I
yeah,
love that.
there's some real heavy hitters in my family, like young ones too. Um, but I had to take it professional. It was just the only other thing, because as I was talking to some mentors during that time, I'm like, I don't know what to do. And one of my mentors told me some great advice. She said, if you're about to do the work, then the next work that you're about to do, you're probably going to do that through retirement. So you should try to choose something that you think you would love and enjoy. And so the only other thing I could think of that I loved and enjoyed was cooking, and I went with it, and it took some very interesting twists and turns. I went from like that prep kitchen job to a prep cook job on a cruise ship. I worked for Norwegian Cruise Lines for 2 years, and toured the Hawaiian Islands on that cruise line. I then got off the ship and went to culinary school in New York, where I built my career over 10 years thinking I would be a restaurant chef until I got an internship at the Food Network and realized that culinary media was the place for me. And so that's really how it that was kind of like the springboard. It was my career was born out of necessity.
I think we all can relate to that. I do want to dig a little bit. I didn't know you spent some time on the cruise line. What was that like?
It was actually my favorite job. It
Shut
was
up.
it was okay. So it was the hardest job I ever had for one. Let me just be
I'm
completely
sure it was
honest.
a grind to that.
Yes, it was a grind, but I knew that if I enjoyed that job, then I was moving into the right career path, doing it in the most intense setting that could exist and I still liked it, I could go and I could do this with my life full time. And sure enough, that's exactly how it went. I had some great Black male chef mentors on the ship who encouraged me to like get off the ship, go to school, learn the basics, and see where your career can go from there. Because I was a little older than like the typical cruise ship crowd, you know, but I wanted to try something different. I obviously you don't make a lot of money in the restaurant industry. I have to be very
Mhm.
transparent about that. And so having an opportunity where I didn't have to pay rent or bills just kind of made sense for that time in my life. And those 2 years, while the most um, I mean, it was just the most valuable experience. And I now have friends all over the world, like as far as Australia. I would not have chosen another path. I'm so happy that it went that way.
Yeah, I think, you probably got an opportunity to meet a lot of people over
Mhm.
what could seem like a short window of time, right? Because they're with you 3 to 7 days,
Yeah.
but you're traveling the whole time. So yeah, that is super dope. I didn't know that. And then, if could you elaborate a little bit more on the phrase culinary media? I've never heard that
Mhm.
before, and I love to like explore that a little bit more.
Sure. So culinary media really is a phrase that describes um, all that it involves to create anything that is food related on television, print, editorial, cookbook, right? Like all the things that we know as media, magazines, TV shows, all of those same things, but just in the food category. So, like every cooking show has a culinary producer. They have shoppers. They have food stylists. Um, every magazine has culinary editors, right? Even magazines that are not fully food centered, if they have a food division, they have someone who is a culinary media professional. So it's all the same things: producers, executive producers, showrunners, all the same things that you need to make any other television show, any other cookbook, or any other magazine function. You have those very same titles, but they fall under culinary media.
I love that. Maybe I'll explore that. But I don't know how I don't like to cook as much, but I cook what I like, right? So like I am the takedown on the mac and cheese. So there could be a whole episode about that because
That would
I
that would that would be a great episode though.
my mac and cheese, I'm telling you, I've been perfecting it over the years. It has now debuted for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So maybe I
Nice.
could do an episode on that.
Listen, and everybody can't do mac and cheese. That's not an easy feat. To say that your mac and cheese is like stellar,
It's like
everyone
street cred, right?
yes, big time, big
So
time.
so thinking about, and I love how you talked about your internship with America's Test Kitchen. And by the way, congratulations on being the first African American woman as a food stylist and test cook on America's Test Kitchen. Like, what does that feel like?
Wow. In the beginning, it felt like if it was exciting, um, but I had reservations, right? Like I took the job, but I still had reservations. Like I didn't want to be a token, right, Black person on a show. I was skeptical about whether I could be my authentic self on camera, like if there was an expectation of a certain stereotype or something. And also, coming into a company that was openly realizing that they had diversity, lack of diversity. They had diversity issues. And did I want to be the person to break that barrier and represent all Black women, right? Because we're
Yes.
raised to be like, you are every woman, right? Shaka and Whitney said it best. I am every woman, right?
And that's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, but um I felt ready, like I was up for the task. I had a lot of experiences in the kitchens of New York. When I interned at the Food Network, I was maybe one of 2 or 3 Black women in the company, visible.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't on camera, so I was actually just behind the scenes. And then I was working in several other kitchens where not only was I the only Black woman, but I was probably like one of 3 women out of 25 employees, right? So I have been in a lot of situations that required me to step up to the task of, being a voice, setting the tone, eliminating the BS to be like, nah, And
Yes.
so when this opportunity came up, if I felt ready, it's like I
Mhm.
was nervous, but I felt ready. And I did it nervous, but ready.
I think that, to your point, you have to weigh the whole situation. Like, what is that going to be like, because they recognize that there was a diversity challenge at the
Hmm.
time, and you were probably going to be the first to face many things, right? And
Oh yeah.
whatever that looks like, and however you position that could be how it's positioned for somebody in the future that you're paving the way for, that comes after you. So it's a amazing thing to do. It's such a pioneer thing to do, but it is something that you have to really carefully think through, because the experience for you may not be, the same as the person after you, right? Because
Hmm.
you're going to work really hard to continue, kind of make sure there's the experience continues to get even better for whoever's to come. But
Yeah.
I also think there's something unique about being a part of a legacy and being the pioneer to something so great, right? I think, all races connect and eat food, so it's
Hmm.
interesting that the diversity of what we see in media sometimes doesn't reflect that.
It's true. It's true. And all I ever wanted, I think, when I finally felt secure in the job, was that whoever would come after me, like you said, would have it easier or better.
Hmm.
um you know and that has happened. We had our competition show, America's Test Kitchen: The Next Generation. The first winner is a Black woman, Antoinette Johnson from
Woohoo! Girl power.
Yeah. So I mean, and not for nothing, I think the coincidence really was that she's a Black woman, because she really is
Super
phenomenal
talented. Yep.
with her work, and her passion for food. So, I'm very proud of that. And I'm proud to say I'm no longer the only or first, like the whole point
Mhm.
of it is to be one of many.
And I think as I look at your background, you played quite a few roles on Test Kitchen. Can you tell me a little bit about all the different hats you wore, and with some of your, like, your key highlights, some of your funniest moments, and some of your moments where you're like, I learned a lot from that.
Okay, well, I wear less hats now than I used to, but I'm a food stylist there, and so I'm responsible for the food imagery that happens in one of our publications called Cook's Country Magazine. I am, as you mentioned, a judge on America's Test Kitchen: The Next Generation, for both seasons. I don't think the second season has dropped yet. Um, and a cookbook author for them. I've
Mhm.
authored 2 cookbooks. And that's, a social media things, a lot of camera work, primarily. I think one of the funniest moments for me was that when I'm on the TV show, it's sort of scripted, right? It's not
Mhm.
fully scripted. Like, what I'm saying are my own words, but we are centered around the recipes that we're featuring for that segment, and that's really all we talk about. Now, that's quite a big difference from being a judge on Next Generation, because that is not scripted, and that's me being myself, that people do not know outside of me, to teaching about recipes. So, um when we did season 1, I was actually uh accused of being a little bit of a harsh judge.
Wow.
Yes, I mean, oh gosh, people in the comments were,
They were
unkind.
rude, right?
Yes, they were like, "Oh, you didn't have to say it like that," and I'm just like, "Well," and so I tell people all the time, I am a woman from Detroit. I'm a Black woman from Detroit.
Hmm.
I am very candid. But I'm also very classy. I'm not going
Yes.
to say anything, crazy. But the other part of that is that these contestants are getting 6 weeks opportunity to get a job that some of my peers have been building for 6 or 7 years.
Years. Yeah.
Right? So I have to be harder on them, right? These are about to be my coworkers. Nobody wants to do anyone else's work. We want to make sure that everybody that comes is capable, right? So I have to be harder. I'm not going to just hand them something. It took me 8 years to get. You're going to work for it, And so I thought it was pretty funny because I was like, well, this is the real me. So if you think that's tough, you probably ain't seen nothing yet. Like come to Detroit, have a visit there.
Right.
Uh, so, but that's been the
Different kind of
funniest part
grind,
to me.
right?
Yes, the funniest part to me is people actually getting to see me as my authentic self.
Hmm.
Not that I'm inauthentic in another way, but in a way where I can actually open up and show people who I am, and they're shocked. They think I'm a sweet Midwest girl, which I am, but I'm
Hmm.
also many things. I'm not a monolith. I'm many things.
We wear many hats, and I think
Mhm.
that if you can ebb and flow the communication and how you want to approach it based on the situation, that's
Yes.
that's the right way to go. Like I
I
think we
agree.
should be multifaceted, right? If I was the same way, I kind of be predictable, and how fun is that?
Yeah, there's no fun there. There's no fun there. And I'm allowed to grow and
Hmm.
change. Like
Yeah.
I am a human being. I'm allowed to grow and change.
Yeah, yeah. I think about, my time in my early in the career, and then I reflect on it. I'm like, whoo, Tony 2.0 is a little bit more softer. It was the edges were a little sharp, and but the message is still the same, but
Mhm.
how we evolve it and how we
Yeah.
deliver it so people can, receive it, but it's still the same message, and we want the best. I feel like when I meet a lot of people from Detroit, we want the best out of ourselves and others. So,
It's true, and I kinda was the other way around, like, my younger days, I was very shy, I
mhm.
was very soft-spoken, like, I was a person who was often seen but not heard,
Oh
like,
wow.
I'm there, like, I know a lot of people know me from being present, but, like, people didn't really start to know who I was as a person until I got older, like, I was just very shy, and so now that I have this forward-facing job where I'm on camera and people are gonna scrutinize me no matter what, I'm like, "Okay, to hell with it. I'm just gonna, real come into myself, realize myself, and just be authentic to that." Like, people are gonna love you or hate you, whether you're being 100% you or 50% you. Might as well be 100% you.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase "be yourself" because everybody else is taken.
Honey, and they don't pay me enough to be anybody else. I don't get
It's
paid that much money.
it's exhausting if you try to be
Yeah.
somebody else. I don't know
Yeah.
how people come home and do it because it's too
Mm-mm.
much for me. I'd rather just stick with me. One of one.
Yes. I know that's right. One of one.
One of one. So I think one of the things that I'm excited about in my personal journey, and it's just been a lot of talk about, is just this healthier lifestyle of
Mhm.
what we actually digest from a food perspective, right? And so being intentional about my food choices. And that's really the birth of this episode that you and I were talking about as we were playing around with what we wanted to talk about. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do we really, from a transformative standpoint, transform that palate and that
Mhm.
plate into
Yeah.
something that is a food that you can, live with, right? And it's one of those things that as you progress and get seasoned, a cheeseburger ain't a cheeseburger like it used to be. And so what does the phrase to you, transforming our plate and palate to making food choices you can live with, what does that phrase mean to you specifically?
I mean, it means to me, like, looking at the ways that we consume food from a cultural and historic perspective,
Hmm.
and using the knowledge that we have now, and kind of merging the two, right? Like, I never encourage people to, like, dead stop eating anything, right? I ask people to evaluate how they make a dish, and figure out if there are alternative, ways, techniques, ingredients that we can use that can make these things that we love better for us, um, And also, like, it means mental transformations too,
Hmm.
right? Because, um, there's a huge issue with, like, food shaming as it relates to cultures, right?
Yes.
And grave misconceptions about the types of food that people eat, and we're not just talking about Black people or people of the diaspora and soul food. We're also talking about the Asian culture and how their amazing cuisine is often reduced to phrases like takeout, right? So it's it's a mindset, right?
It
And then
is.
it's using food knowledge to make better decisions.
And I think that, one of my goals is just to like work on my relationship with food, right?
Mhm.
I'm definitely a person that will socialize and, meet someone for dinner and have social conversations. But if you're going to do that, what choices are you making? And then also, what's a quick dish to you? And can you make some more healthier choices on snacking? So those are the things that I'm working on. And
Mhm.
I think that, you know, you you spend time, I think, even on the in your book, just talking about some healthier choices for boards, right? And so
Mhm.
I think one of the things that was on my mind is just kind of, do you garden and do you grow any of your fresh foods? For some reason, I have this vision in my mind that you got like a peaceful garden and you're just out there growing your vegetables and coming and cooking it. I could be completely wrong, but that's been in my head that maybe you're growing some of your food, and even what would be some beneficial, something that would benefit us from growing some of our own vegetables and things in the garden.
Sure. Well, you're not all the way wrong. I grew up, in my grandmother's house in Detroit. My grandparents were divorced and separated probably before I was born, but my grandfather always kept a garden in the back of my grandmother's house. And so I grew up eating literally like farm to table. He would come and pick it and just put it in the kitchen window. Sometimes he wouldn't even come in the house. He'd just put it in the kitchen window. And my grandmother would come home and open the window and she would, make fried green tomatoes or make smothered squash, summer squash, anything that was there, cabbage he grew. So I grew up in that way, right? I grew up going up north and picking berries and apples. So that was like very, very natural for me. It probably wasn't until the pandemic that I started like growing things again, like on my
Mhm.
own, tomatoes, peppers, things like that. And so, I live in Boston. It's very urban city. So I don't always have the capacity to grow. So I do have a little tabletop grower. So I do try to grow like herbs and lettuce, from time to
Oh
time.
wow. Okay.
Um, yeah. So I think it's called click and grow. I don't get any money for telling people that, but it's a really great way to just like try your hand at like using fresh herbs. You can grow many things. I've grown lavender on it. I've grown
Wow. And I
tomato,
love lavender.
and it's so nice because I can clip that lavender. I hang it in my shower. I infuse oils with it from my own body. It inspires you. You can grow peppers there. I've grown bib lettuce. So it's just having something growing to eat fresh every day makes you feel like you're connected to your food source. So in my ideal life, in my
Right. God
my
no.
culinary Oprah life, I have a lush garden in the back of the house,
Of course
uh,
you do.
a greenhouse, for
Yeah.
flowers. Soon come, as they say, soon come.
Soon to come.
Hmm.
Well, I am enjoying this conversation. You're dropping so many gems, and I am learning even more about your background as a fangirl and some of the things that you've done in culinary media, and also some of the things that you've done with your family. And with us being from the same hometown of Detroit, I feel deeply connected just to some of your upbringing. We're going to take a quick break for commercials. So I'm excited to share our sponsor, Potty Products, who is a part of this transformation journey and making sure that people have transformative experiences as we continue to grow as a culture, as a audience, because we are on the Resilient Radio stream. So we'll be back in a few minutes.
I like shiny things. You like shiny things, got us in trouble. We like shiny things, thought it would change our world.
Welcome back to Detroit Girl Transformed. I'm your host, Toni Carter. If you are interested in advertisement or sponsorship, make sure you contact me at dgt313podcast at gmail.com. Again, that's dgt313podcast at gmail.com. We're looking for additional sponsors to join this journey of transformation with us and really share your thoughts and your transformative experiences. So if you are interested, make sure you contact me and I'd be happy to work with you on advertisement and sponsorship. Also, stay in touch with us on IG. Follow us on DGT underscore 313. Also, we're on Facebook at Detroit Girl Transform. It's transformation time, and we're looking for a bunch of people who are interested in embarking on this journey with us. So let's get back to it. Let's get back to our episode. We're having so much fun with Chef Elle Simone Scott, and I'm looking forward to her joining us again to finish the next half of this conversation. Welcome back.
It's been so nice. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about food, maybe some books.
Some books, some food. It's all about the good times and the gossip. So I'm excited to have you back as well. So let's get back to it. It's part two of this episode. I can't tell you how excited I was that you were going to come on here and talk about food. I'm a foodie, and so I love to have that same passion shared with someone else, but specifically someone I can learn from, right? Because I like to just dine, but it's really good if I can learn from an actual food expert. So I want to talk a little about your, just some of the amazing things that you've done in the industry itself. So I'm very
Mhm.
inspired by your ability to shatter ceilings in the food industry. I've heard from my friends in the culinary industry that being a woman of color in this industry can be challenging. Two challenges, right? Being a woman and also being a person of color.
Mhm.
Can you talk about some of your experiences over the years and anything that you've learned in your journey that you want to share with other women and other women of color?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my first experiences were not um, common in that I kind of started in a more slightly inclusive um, and culturally diverse background by working on the cruise ship, right? So that was probably the most diverse experience I've ever had. And having that was probably so great because when I got off of the cruise ship and started working on land, I internally like set a standard for how I would allow myself to be treated or talk
Mm-hmm.
to in a way that I was, like it didn't happen on purpose. It was like an accidental surprise that after working in that sort of environment, going to anything differently just never resonated, never said well with me. And that's not to say that I didn't have some experiences. One in particular was that I was working at a catering company. Well, it was a company that had many divisions. Like the owner was a huge restaurateur in New York City. He had a catering company. He had restaurants. He also had a lot of restaurants, these same restaurants in a lot of the major stadiums around the city. And when my supervisor left, I was pretty much running the department until they found a replacement, but I also was vying for the position of my former supervisor. And when I realized I was actually asked to train the person who would be my boss, I told them absolutely not. If I'm not getting the position, I'm certainly not going to give all the skills to someone who's a man, who doesn't have the experience. You want me to give the experience to someone when I have it and you can hire me? And I think that was the first time I knew I was being discriminated against because I was a woman and probably because I was a Black woman. Right. But I was good enough to do the job for 6 months till they found someone. Um, so that was a moment for me, and that kind of set the tone for actually what kind of career I wanted to have, right? Because after I graduated culinary school and after I finished interning at the Food Network, I started to what we call a stage. I started doing stages around the city, which is basically working in a restaurant for a short amount of time for free. They can't, that's illegal now. They can't do that now. But you would reach out to the chef and say, I would love to get some experience, in your restaurant. Potentially, if you're hiring, I would want to be considered. And they would allow you to come in. Like there's no chef that would turn down two free weeks of prep cook or whatever, right? And so I started getting some experience in and around cities. I had very positive experiences with like chefs, Marcus Samuelson's restaurants. Um, Danny Meyer has a good restaurant culture. And then I had some that weren't so great, but they also were not very well known restaurants. But I think it was that time that I realized that I had actually fallen in love with culinary media, which is predominantly women. I mean, it's predominantly white women, but it's a predominantly women run space.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with that world and realized very quickly that the restaurant world was not for me. A, it didn't pay well. B, I didn't like the hours.
Yeah.
Culinary media is a 9 to 5 job, usually salaried, and you get paid pretty decently. So I think I had lessons early, so I was able to quickly decipher which culinary environments work best for me as a woman and as a Black woman.
And I think there's a couple of lessons in that, in what you talked about. One, what a blessing to start the industry in a very, inclusive environment, right?
Mhm.
Because then it gives you an opportunity to ground and level set on what you expect as a path forward, right? Because you know
Yes,
what good looks like, and so if you're not going to accept anything less, and so I think that alone is just a blessing of an introduction into an environment that
true.
some of my chef friends have said is really male dominated in some situations, and people are being talked down to. So for you to start in such an environment where you were able to meet people from all over the world but be inclusive, I think was a good launching pad for you to
For
really
sure.
kind of identify what your boundaries are going to be. The other thing you talked about, I actually have a little bit of experience with in being in 20 plus years of HR, and that is that role of what we call the interim role, right? And
Mhm.
so that can get very tricky. I can
Yeah.
tell you just from experience, like, one of the things that I've done over the years in that particular setting and platform is just really have an agreement on the front side of what the layout looks like. Like, we know this person is interested in that specific promotional opportunity. So
Mhm.
what are some guiding principles on how we want to operate in this space? Is there going to be some pay attached to it as a
Right.
temporary assignment? How long is temporary? Because when you get into 4, 5, and 6 months, is that really considered temporary when the average standard probationary period is 90 days? What
Mhm.
are some milestones and observations that you want to see and achieve in that time frame to observe this person's performance ability? Because quite frankly, this gives this individual a competitive edge against other candidates because
Mhm.
they're allowed to perform in the role itself.
That's
What is
right.
going to be the timeline on the feedback and who's responsible for giving the feedback and what's the frequency of it? So obviously I could be a bit annoying to a manager when it comes to probationary interim, but I am an employee and company advocate, and I think that in both scenarios the company and the employee should be clear on what's expected,
Yes. And I
what's the
think
path. Yeah.
they would have benefited greatly from someone like you.
Oh, thank you. What's the
Yeah.
path forward? What's the feedback? And it shouldn't be a surprise. So at the end of the, interim assignment, if someone says, "Congratulations, we're going to give you the role," or "We're not," if there's conversations along the way, this shouldn't be a surprise, right?
Mhm.
Because we've made that investment in you to have that ongoing discussion. And I'm not asking for it to be perfect as an HR leader.
Yeah.
I'm asking for it to be fluid and very
And
transparent.
transparent. That's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
So
That's it.
I can relate to that in many situations. And I think it's an incredible opportunity, but it has to be managed
Mhm.
appropriately for both parties involved, right? Because it's a
Yes.
very difficult spot for someone to come in and take the role if the person who had it for 6 months didn't get it. We don't
Mhm.
even think about that. That new leader, are we setting them up for success in that kind of
Right.
environment, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
so I can relate to that, and kudos to you for just standing up for what you felt was what you felt your agency was, and your agency was not to come in and train someone to do the job that they said you weren't qualified to do. So
Right.
yeah, so while I don't connect to the food part of it, but I can certainly connect to that actual part of it. And then the
Yeah.
last thing I'm really, really connected to is when you were talking about just how you negotiated and decided what was the right role for you and what hours you wanted to work, what time of, what that looked like for your work life balance, and just saying,
Mhm.
you know what, I like food, but the food industry may not be for me in this particular arena, but maybe it
Right.
is in the media arena. And so I think as women, we have to be so assertive with those things. And sometimes we kind of say, well, I got to take what I'm going to get, or
Mhm.
I'm brand new to this, so I really don't deserve. We may have a little bit of imposter syndrome sometime, and not think we deserve certain things. So I think it's very inspiring that you were really in the driver's seat of your career and also of what your well-being looked like. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Well, this was a second career for me. So like I had already had a little bit of career experience,
Hmm.
and in that same vein, I was a lot older than some of my culinary peers. I mean, I went to school with diverse age range of people, but um the older people already knew what they wanted to do. Like they were coming in because they were already working in food and wanted to get licensed. I did not, right? But I knew at 30 plus years old that standing on my feet for 15 hours a day didn't, I'd done that on the cruise ship. Like I had already done that, and
Hmm.
that wasn't really what I wanted to do, because there's also a part of me that is a creative. I learned that later on in life, and I wanted to also be able to flex my own creative muscle. And when you're working in restaurants, you are the chef's executive chef's creative interpreter. You interpret their creativity on a plate. And I just wanted something that I could be just much more of myself, whatever that evolved into over time.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So can I talk about one of my obsessions?
Yes, please.
So I love this book.
Thank you. It's
Board
my baby.
I am a bored like queen. I love to have a party and people enter my party and see my amazing board. So this book is like my favorite. And I love this book so much that I gifted it to many of my family and friends for the holidays. So I was like, you get a board book. You get so I was just so excited. So I first of all want to highlight that we can get this book on Amazon.com. It
Yes.
is highly rated, one of the top rated books on Amazon. I was so excited, and I am just excited to talk about this book. I'm obsessed with it. Can you share some of your favorite board dishes and even some healthy boards that you loved about in this that you loved in this book?
Sure. I think one of my favorite boards is the Spanish tapas board. Um,
Mhm.
because I, like you, love to travel internationally, and I'm always inspired by the meals that I have across the globe, and bringing some of those recipes back home and applying them in an approachable way for the home cook excites me, because like to travel is a privilege, right? And everyone does not have the luxury or the privilege, you know, to travel, and the ways that I can share that with people is through food. So Spanish tapas is probably my favorite. Um, obviously the healthier boards are like the crudités, the ones with all
Mhm.
the vegetables. But the thing I like to tell people about this boards book is that it's not really intended for you to follow to a T necessarily, right? Like every book I create is really to inspire you to, come up with your own food ideas, right? So like in the boards book, there's like the what is it? The taco breakfast burrito, breakfast taco board, right? Like lots of healthy things there. We have poblano peppers and onions and avocado and eggs. Depending on what you like, you can really transform that breakfast board into anything. You can make it all vegan, right? Like there's even every board that I created there should be at least some way that you can switch it to some other dietary lane, right? Like everyone can be made vegan except for probably the seafood centered ones.
Mhm.
But I grew up with lots of vegetarian friends. I grew up Seventh-day Adventist.
Mhm.
And so a lot of my friends were vegetarians. A lot of them didn't eat pork. I have lots of Muslim friends from college. Like I have friends from all over the world who only, who have certain things that they can and cannot eat. And the thing about entertaining is that you want your guests to feel special, right? You want them to feel considered and thought of, which is what I'm sure you love doing boards, right? You do
Yes, yes.
everything that you do is so very intentional, and a board is an opportunity to be that with food, right? Like to be specific and intentional, and it makes people feel like you care, you thought of them, right? And so any board in that book can be turned on its head to accommodate whoever your guest is, right? It can all be made, healthy. The nacho boards can be made with all vegetables or with vegan meat alternatives, right?
And
Yeah.
I, and I think one of the things I love about the book, many things, I'm a visual person. So this visual, the aesthetic, the pictures, this martini board sent me. Okay. Like I was
I love
like,
it.
I love a good martini night. So as you can tell, this board, I could go on and on. And I do love this one particular this picture too, because it's just talking about look at you and your journey. And let's just talk about making bacon in the oven. Because that is a serious thing. Like
It
I
is.
I argue with people that don't cook bacon in the oven. I'm like, it's crispy. You don't
Yeah.
have all the grease flying everywhere. I don't want grease in my eyeballs, is in my hair. But I love to see in this book we don't only see the end result of the board. We have pictures and aesthetics of your journey. So
Mhm.
as you can tell, you probably should have had me on there to like do a critic on your board because I would have got everybody hyped to get this board
It's
book.
not too
But
late. It's not too
oh,
late. You can still do it.
listen,
We can still do it. We can
I
still
will.
do it.
I will
I
gladly
you
do it.
when I do a cookbook, I like to and it's also part of the America's Test Kitchen brand is like because all of our work is centered around home cooks. We want everything to feel approachable. We want to show you the steps, to making certain things, kind of just as a guide, like, am I doing, when you're cooking something you've never made before, the first thing you're asking yourself is, am I doing this right? And so we like to try and provide some visuals to let you know that you are on the right track. And that's really important. I mean, that book even has some charts in the very beginning that talk about like how many ounces, like how to shop for making a board. Because what a lot of people don't know is that we've never had a book like boards at America's Test Kitchen before. So everything we do is recipe,
Mhm.
regimented, exact amounts. Boards are not like that, right? Like boards are built determined on how many people you have coming to your function, right? So we were trying to figure out like how can we teach the home cook not to overshop, right? To prevent waste, because we have a zero waste policy, zero food waste policy. So how can we teach the reader to approach boards in that way? Like how many ounces does per person, like the nutritional standard, which is kind of like 4 ounces, right? So, determining how many ounces of food you buy versus how many people are coming, little things like that are very helpful, right? Like we want you to feel like, you know, you have a fairy board mother guiding
I
you
love
along the
that. A
way,
fairy board mother. I love that. Awesome, awesome. And when we think about, just kind of that transforming that palate and that plate and just that
Mhm.
healthier lifestyle, do you have any suggestions for dishes that we could make in less than 30 minutes for those of us that are on the go or just not patient cooks that we could just put together something nice and healthy in 30 minutes or less?
Yes. Um, I do. So my go-to semi-healthy things, right? Because everything I eat is semi-healthy. I like to add maybe something that I really love with some things that are healthy. So my go-tos, I tend to make pestos, right? Like I love a pesto and pasta. It's very easy. If you have any, spinach left over, any of these green vegetables, you can make pesto from like scallions. You can make pesto from spinach. Making a little pesto to go with pasta, very easy. And pesto actually lasts a long time in your refrigerator, right?
Oh,
Let me see.
wow.
Yeah, it's super simple. I mean, and I also like to make things like enchiladas,
Mhm.
and that can be made simply because I also do cheat things, right? Like I'll go buy rotisserie chicken. I want chicken enchiladas. I'll buy the flour tortillas. I'll get the sauce from off the shelf. If I have some time, maybe I'll make it. But if I want to make something inexpensive, healthy, right, and easy to make, I lean towards these things, right? Like we use cheats in America's Test Kitchen all the time. There's a risotto recipe that I love. It's lemon chicken basil risotto, and the chicken is a rotisserie
Mhm.
chicken. You go buy the rotisserie chicken, that cuts down half the time, right? So just thinking about like ways that you can um, use things that are pre-made in the grocery store that are relatively healthy, like rotisserie is obviously not fried. You can do so many things, enchiladas. I like making quiches. Sometimes the quiche and salad is dinner for me, and it doesn't have to be complicated, trying to think what else. I'm also the kind of girl, like, I'll make stuff for later, right? Like, I've already bought some tomatoes. I had some ricotta cheese left over from lasagna I made last week, and I bought some basil, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna roast those tomatoes, put the ricotta, the basil, and some parmesan in a blender, and just make a sauce and put it to the side. And then if I come home and all I have time to do is or energy to do is boil noodles, I have a nice robust tomato sauce that I've made that I can use anytime. So like making healthy meals in a reasonable amount of time does require a little bit of forethought, but not a lot. You don't have to, go crazy with it, That rotisserie chicken can turn into some chicken soup, get some frozen vegetables from the grocery store, drop some noodles in there, and now you have a chicken noodle soup. It's not really hard. It's actually easier to eat consciously. I don't like to call it healthy, but eating consciously, it helps to transform your plate and your palate. You're
Your
like,
palate.
"Oh, yeah, like, oh, this was healthy and still delicious and easy," right? Like I didn't compromise anything, A lot of our people be like, "Oh, if I have to eat healthy, then it's not like eating black food, cultural foods." And that's not true. That
Yeah,
is not
let's not give ourselves
true.
that life sentence, right? That our food can't,
Yes.
yeah, health can't be healthy.
Yes, and it's really not that. It's just diversifying the offerings, right? Like no, no, and I love to tell people all the time, like, I don't know a single black person who eats soul food every day. We don't eat like that every day.
No,
That
no, we
is
don't. I
that's
couldn't. I
no,
couldn't.
it's impossible. It's celebratory foods, but introducing people to recipes and ingredients that they probably don't think to use, because it's just not familiar to them is really the way to go. Like just be courageous. Step out on a limb and try something a little different.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Well, last question. When you're not in the kitchen making culinary magic, where can we find you?
Um, well, let's see. When I'm not in the kitchen, what am I doing? Well, as of late, as of the past almost 1 year, I've been very busy living the life of a new member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So that has
Ooh.
ooh, has taken up a lot of my time.
Yes, it
And I have
is. Delta keeps us busy.
keeps us busy, and I have loved every moment of it. So that's been a part of my adjusting. Um, I'm also kind of um living a little bit of a low key life in terms of transitioning into new creative ideas. I'm looking
Ooh.
to open a bed and breakfast, hopefully in Detroit.
I'm
Um,
excited.
I have a 3-year plan for that. So, I'm gonna be attending a couple of conferences, Association for Lodging Professionals, of which I'm a member. So, maybe be looking for me in the hospitality spaces, sharing my tips and tricks for bringing amazing hospitality to a city near you, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. And one of my dreams is to open up a bed and breakfast in like my favorite places like Lake Como, Italy or
Right? Oh my
Spain.
God.
Maybe you never know. We might collab later.
I would absolutely love that. My initial dream was Barbados. That was where
Ooh,
I first went and said I want to open a bed and breakfast, and that probably is still in the it's still in the
the
cards.
sky's the limit.
Yeah, but Detroit is getting so many rave reviews as it has long since deserved, about being a place, to visit and to be. And I've been away from the city for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add to that culture and that economy, and I feel like, it's time to go home.
It is time, and it's nice to that is Detroit, and some of the transformation of the city is
Mhm.
why I came up with the name Detroit Girl Transformed. I feel like as I'm transforming, so is my city, and
Yeah,
it's just a beautiful thing to watch up close and afar. So I
it's true.
wish you the best of luck, and I'm gonna come try it out. I'm gonna be like one of your favorite guests. Like, oh, I'm just at home sitting on the porch at my bed and breakfast at my hometown.
Well, we'll have your exclusive board waiting for you in your suite.
Oh, now you've just sung music to my ears. Like that would be like you're singing to me right now. So I'm excited. Well, I can't believe this Girl Power Hour has went by so fast. It has
No,
really been a pleasure. So first of all, thank you to my fellow soar and my fellow Eagle. We went to the same college, Eagles Flying High, Eastern
that's
Michigan
right.
University. Shout out to you. Thank you for continuing to inspire people to just achieve what we thought might not be achievable. I think you are truly a testimony of what the impossible looks like. So continue to inspire us. I will definitely be a fangirl up close and afar. So excited that you were able to join us today. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast and sharing your gems with my audience of Detroit Girl Transformed.
Thank you for having me. You are such a huge inspiration, and it has been my honor and pleasure. And thanks again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So be sure to check us out on Detroit Girl Transform on the Resilient Radio stream on YouTube. You can definitely subscribe and have tons of fun with us as we continue to do all these amazing things on this radio stream, because I'm telling you, the Resilient Radio stream is going places. So I'm just trying to be a part of it. So you can check us out every Tuesday on Transformation Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. So I am so excited to host guests throughout the rest of this season who are going to be talking about their transformative experiences. Thank you to my source, Chef Elle Simone Scott, for jumping on. And have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon. Bye. Be sure to tune in to next week's episode on Detroit Girl Transformed. I am looking forward to this episode. It is near and dear to my heart. This episode is where 5 Detroiters are going to talk about their experience and transition from their hometown Detroit to either DC, Maryland, or Virginia. It is going to be tons of fun. We talk about the different lingo. We talk about what it means to be successful in a new city. But more importantly, we talk about the bond that we've created with the people that we've met over time. So what an exciting episode. If you're thinking about branching out and leaving your hometown or leaving your familiar place, you will have an opportunity to hear from 5 people who have amazing success stories, anywhere from being away from their hometown from 2 months to 20 plus years and building a new home, legacy, and brand in the DMV area. So stay tuned. It's going to be an episode with amazing guests who drop a lot of gems. Don't want to miss it. A lot of fun and a lot of. Make sure you check out Detroit Girl Trans on Tuesdays at 10 p.m. on the radio. Stay tuned. About this journey of transformation. Let's take this journey together. To continue on this journey with us, each episode will have various examples of transformation. Be sure to subscribe to the Resilient Radio stream on the YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so you can get updates. It's transformation time, baby.